What's that like?
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the What's That Like podcast. I'm your host for this episode, Bobby Krug. Now, usually I'm sitting over the producer's chair on the other side of the room, and I've only been on the first episode. I've kind of chimed in every once in a while throughout, but today is a very special episode of the What's That Like podcast. We've turned the tables around here in the studio, and I am still, joined here, John Knowles, technically the real host of the podcast, but we're going to ask him today what's that like in reference to the podcast. I had an idea to do the state of the podcast where we kind of, for all the new viewers out there, new listeners, to be able to kind of, get a step back in the past and see where the podcast kind of got its start from, where we've gone since the start. I figured it'd be best if I kind of took the steering wheel on this since I've been here pretty much at the birth of the podcast. I'm sitting here with John. John, how you doing?
I'm great, Bob. That was really good.
Eventually, I will be taking over as the hosting spot, and you'll be the producer.
Yes.
But
yes, you probably will.
Let's just jump right in real quick to, when did you decide that you wanted to do a podcast?
Yeah, it goes back a couple of years. I actually have been listening to podcasts for probably a decade or better. They were in their infancy. You had to go download them in strange places off apps like Podcatcher and Catcher or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I had to put them on a little MP3 player, and I could maybe get one or two episodes on them at a time. Those old iPod shuffles, would only hold maybe, 15 songs, maybe an hour's worth of music. And that's about all you'd get in terms of a podcast. But it's just something I always liked. It's like radio. It's on demand, and you could listen to it anytime you wanted, wherever you wanted. I always called a podcast, it's like free Netflix for your ears.
Yeah.
In a way. Any podcast you want, you'll find one that you like out there. And I'd listen to a bunch of them all the time. And I always thought, I could do one of these. I always thought it would be something I'd like to do. I just never knew what it would be or when I would do it or who I would even talk to. But eventually I just kind of got it into my head I was going to do it. So maybe about last fall, I guess it was on Black Friday, the traditional shopping day after Thanksgiving. And I'm on Amazon, and they had these boom microphones, condenser microphones and everything, and they had them on sale for like $26. So I bought two of them. And at the time, even my wife, Corey, she goes, "What are you going to do with those?" I go, "I'm going to start a podcast." And it was like, yeah, right. And I had them here. I had them in the studio for probably, 4 months. It was probably late February, early March. And I was out here one rainy afternoon on a Sunday, not doing much. And I decided to kind of hook it all up together with a mixer and see if I could do it. And what I needed at the time was somebody that was media trained enough in the way on the internet to come over here and tell me if I was doing it right. So I called this kid that lives next door to me.
Oh, yeah?
You.
What was his? Oh,
yeah,
me. Okay.
You, Bobby Krug.
Yeah.
And I said, why don't you come over here and let's just try this out? And we didn't know what it was. We just kind of did a little test thing of audio for about 15 minutes. And I know we looked at each other and we're both like, that's pretty good. We should try this again. And so we did. And, we kind of sat around a little bit trying to make sure it sounded good. That was my number one goal. If I was going to do one, I didn't want to be like two morons sitting around on their gaming headsets, talking with real poor audio and just having edits and all that stuff that weren't made, that didn't make it sound like a professional podcast. Even though it was going to be something for free, I wanted it to sound like $1 million. And I just got going. I started doing it. By the end of that night, I figured out how to get it out on the internet, put it on iTunes, and the next thing I knew, I had a podcast. Then the work really started.
Yeah. When you thought of the podcast idea, why'd you lean towards a podcast? Why? I mean, the big thing now on the What's That Like Nation, I guess you could call it, would be your video content on the Facebook side. How come you didn't originally start with that instead of, if you would have went that route, it would have been a whole lot bigger, maybe to this day, than going audio the first time around?
Good question. I thought there were a lot of people out there like me that just wanted to listen to something while they were in their car or on a walk or where they were exercising or something like that. Mm-hmm. Video content on the internet, and nobody knows this as well as you because you're a prolific vlogger yourself. To me, video content on the internet is just there for quick hits. It's it's 2-3 minutes. Maybe it's something funny. It's a song.
Cat videos.
Yeah. Somebody falling down a flight of stairs, fail videos or whatever they might be. And I certainly didn't want to do that, but I wanted something long form. I wanted something where you got to know something over the course of a commute. I've got about a 45-minute drive to work every day. And my favorite podcasts are the ones where the guest comes on. They speak for 45 minutes with the host. You get to know what that guest has got going on in their life. If they got a new record coming out, or they got a new movie coming out, or they've done something cool in their life, or they were an astronaut or whatever. And I thought, there's just a lot of things that I'd be interested in. And I thought of what that content would be. I wanted it to be at least educational. Now, the trick was for me is, what was it going to be about? I had no idea when I started this. And I remember brainstorming with, actually, he's one of our first guests, was Tim Boostrom. And I had a whole bunch of things written down, like maybe potential podcast topics. What would I talk about? What are my interests? What are the things that might interest me? And I just kind of looked around at the different things that I liked in media today. And it was things like sports and movies, history, local interest stories. If I looked through all the podcasts that I listened to, there was a very wide variety of things I was interested in, and I couldn't pick just one. And I thought, well, if I got people that did interesting things, and maybe they went into interesting places, and they had an interesting story to tell, I could get them on my show. And I thought at the time, one of the segments of my show would be called What's That Like? And I would ask somebody that was doing something, what it was like to do whatever it is they did. And Tim actually goes, no, that's the show. What's That Like is the show. And it was just like that revelation moment. I had the idea, but he clarified it for me. And that became the thing that I really keyed in on. And what it's done is it's allowed me to open this up to any subject. I mean, if you look back at some of the guests we've got like Tim, he was a fantasy baseball player. You raced go-karts. We've had ghost hunters, tornado hunters, guys that run non-for-profits, guys that have raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for cancer research. You name it, we've had them. We've promoted local events, music festivals, whatever. And the beauty of What's That Like is it can be anything. I wanted it to be a podcast for Central Illinois because that's where I could get people from. And I knew there was a built-in audience that was underserved. I wanted to have a structure of a show so every single time somebody listened to it, they'd know what the format was going to be and knew what they were going to expect out of it. And I've still got a ton of ideas. I mean, we've done 13 episodes. I mean, I've got a list as long as that legal pad is long of potential people I'd like to talk to. I just haven't gotten to them yet.
And then when you were talking about, where it's gone, did you expect it to get this big, this quick?
Yes and no. I mean, what I'll say is I thought I had a good enough idea that it would take off. I didn't really think it would take off in the fashion that it has. So I look at kind of the What's That Like nation, as we always say on the Facebook page, as a triumvirate between. There's the anchor, which is the Facebook page. That's where you come and you can figure out what's going on with the show, so to speak. On one corner of that is what I would call the heart of what this show is, and that's what you and I are doing right now. It's having a long-form conversation. It's the podcast, and as you know, those are traditionally audio shows. Where it's kind of come to the other part of that triangle, the other corner, is video has become an important part of What's That Like Nation has really been all about. When I look at numbers, I've had it as of today, it's almost 50,000 video views in 6 months. Now, is that a big number? No, some cat video might get that on YouTube. And, some music video that somebody else puts out gets 6 or 7 million. I'm not in that league. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I started this from scratch a couple of months ago. And the fact that there's over almost 600 people that like the page today, and I've had over 50,000 video views at this point. And the audio show alone is probably approaching 6,000 downloads of, 40-minute, hour-long shows that people are listening to and taking in for content however they want to. So I look at it in that way. It's that triumvirate of things. I'll give you some information on the Facebook page. You'll hear a long form interview on the audio podcast. And then every so often, you're going to get a quick video. I travel a lot for work. It just seemed like one of these things. My friend goes, "Oh, you should do a podcast," when we were at the antique archaeology store up in Iowa. And I'm like, well, I can't sit down and do an audio show, but I just pulled the iPhone out and we were goofing off, and you got the first one. And then it was, oh, well, we'll try this some other places. So now when I go someplace interesting, I always kind of pull the phone out and decide if it's going to work or not. And some of the places I do it and then I go, just doesn't work, and you never see that. And then other times I'll go somewhere and it'll just be a spark of imagination right off the top of my head. And I go, oh, that was the thing to do. And it works really well. But it's become this triumvirate of things that I never expected. I thought I'd use a Facebook page to just let people know a new audio show is out, which we still do. But the videos have trumped that in terms of overall quick hits and videos. So I know there's a lot of folks out there that only know me from the video side. And I hope if you're watching the videos, come over to the other side. I know you've all turned on the radio at some point in time. And it's so easy to do. You know, you just go on your phone and you search for podcasts. If you have an Apple phone, just search for the podcast app, type in "What's That Like" in the search box, and I'm right there. And we're on YouTube, on the ATA network, your channel. Mm-hmm. We're on Stitcher. We're on TuneIn Radio. We're on Google Play. You can even go to your Amazon Dot, your Echo Dot, and say, "Alexa, ask TuneIn to play the What's That Like podcast." And my show will play right there in your kitchen. So I try to make it easy. It's free. Doesn't cost you a thing. There's no subscriptions. And you get them whenever I put the show out.
So would you say, going off of what you said about the video side, with just, putting out one, it got pretty good feedback, you do it again, gets even more feedback, would you say that would be one of the best, almost you'd say, accidents to happen to the podcast?
Well, there's been two, and I'll say yes, the videos were. I did the one from the antique archaeology back in, I think, early June. And then there was a Saturday morning right here in Mount Olive. I was working with the fire department, and we were working the annual Tour de Donut. And you're a rider in it, so you know what the Tour de Donut is. But for the folks out there that don't, it's a 33-mile bike race through the countryside here. And every time you stop, if you eat a donut, they knock 5 minutes off your time. And I thought, well, that's kind of a cool thing. I've been working at it for years. So I was standing there. My friend again goes, "You going to film a little podcast today?" And I went, why didn't I think of that? So I pulled out the phone and I went to the donut stop and I had all the ladies showing me the donuts. And then the next thing I know, the local organizer, Bill Vogt, shows up. And I go, "Hey, come over here and stand on camera." He had no idea what we were doing. He had no concept of what a podcast, vidcast, anything was. He was like, "Why are you filming me on your phone?" And I got him to do it for like 4 or 5 minutes. And the next thing you know, I started following people around. Like I bumped into you at the donut stop, got a mid-race report. Mm-hmm. And then I started just asking people how they found the race. What are they doing here? How many donuts they're going for? And I had a whole little video segment that ran 8 or 9 minutes. And that thing alone, I think, got 10,000, 12,000 views by people all over the world because of the Tour de Donut, and we hashtagged it, and it was right during the Tour de France. It was crazy. So that was really accident number one that brought a lot of people my way. The second one was this drawing, and if you listened to the show before, I had the folks on from Turner Hall earlier this summer. We were talking about this thing they do every week called the Queen of Hearts drawing, and that's really just been the rage all through Illinois this year. It's this drawing that goes on at these non-for-profits where people come, they buy tickets, they get in the drawing. If their card's drawn, if they get the Queen of Hearts, they win the pot. And some of these pots have been getting up $500,000, $250,000. One up in Northern Illinois was over $1.6 million. Well, the Turner Hall here in Mount Olive's got one, and it's been going, and I've been entering this thing for almost a year now. And I've gotten pulled a couple of times, but never really won any money. And then as the numbers started getting higher, it was about 50 grand. And I'm up there one night, and again, somebody goes, I don't think of this myself. Somebody goes, "Are you going to go film this for your podcast?" And I go, "Yeah, I should." And you know what? I'm going to go live. So I went live. And the first time I did it, I think I had 8 live viewers.
So that was your first live podcast?
Exactly. I think I said 7 or 8 viewers. It maybe got viewed 100 times by the end of the night. But then some people the next week, they were going up to buy their tickets. and they asked like the people selling tickets, how will I know if I win? And some of those folks going, oh, well, that John Knowles guy, he's got something on the internet. You can watch that. And then the next week I did it, and it jumped a little bit. Maybe it was 30. And then the week after that, it was maybe 40. And so I started doing this. I've been doing it maybe 6-8 weeks in a row now. It's become this thing that I can't not do. And people still, to this day, they're liking the page. They're going, are you the guy that does the Queen of Hearts live drawing? I'm like, yeah. They expect it. There's a lot of people right here in this little area. They say they just watched the show and they sit in their car because if you win, you got 5 minutes to produce yourself to get there, and you can win the 70% of the pot instead of just half. So I know a lot of people just watch the show on their phone in their car, and then if name were to be called, they'd run up there real fast. That's the primary way they keep up with it.
So then you're telling me that if somebody wins the 70% through the podcast, you get that extra 20%?
No, I wish that's actually a good idea, Bob. I wonder if I can work that out. But no, I mean, it's become this thing now that we can't not do. Like a couple of weeks ago, I was out of town, and I'm like, well, I can't be there. Who can I trust to do this? And then there's only one. I told you, I'm like, look, you either do this, Bob, or it's just not getting done. I don't really trust anyone else now with the brand of what's that like, because I knew you'd do a great job in doing it. You went up there. You did a phenomenal job covering it. A lot of people said you were way better than me, which I took, personally. But then the last couple of weeks, we jumped. I mean, it just kept getting bigger. Like we had 130 live viewers at the moment during the drawing last week. This past Friday, it was over 200, and we're recording this on a Sunday after that Friday, and it's been viewed on Facebook like 2,300, 2,400 times. And what it's also done, talk about driving traffic. I mean, I've gotten the huge jump in traffic to my Facebook page now as a result of that. So it's this happy accident that's just driven activity of the show, and it's increased the brand awareness of it and everything else that it is. And I hope some of those folks now, I won't get all of them. They're just going to watch it for the Queen of Hearts, and I get that. But if I get 10% of them or 15% of those folks that just watch that video and they find the audio show, it's worth every moment of my time.
Yeah. So over this span that you've had this busy, time with doing the podcast work, what would you say the most difficult part of maintaining the podcast and making it successful?
Oh, I think it'd be more successful if I had more time. So I'll say time is the enemy. I got a full-time job. I got a full-time family. This comes third or fourth down the list, obviously. So I travel a lot, so I'm gone. I just can't have a show that I produce every week and release it on a Tuesday. It's not on a schedule, which in podcast terms is the biggest mistake you can make. If you had a regular show that was on every week at the same time and people came to expect it, that's the good thing to really grow the podcast, the audio show, if you will. And I don't have time to do that. The flip side of that is I only do it when the time is right. I don't have to crank out another episode just because it's Tuesday. If you're a fan of the show Saturday Night Live, Lorne Michaels has been the producer of that show for over 40 years. And there's a saying he has, the show doesn't go on because it's ready. The show goes on because it's 11:30. I am the flipped opposite of that, all right? This show goes on when it's ready, when I feel I've got a guest of quality that I think my folks will like. I don't do shows just to do shows. So what I hope you're getting out of them is the best experience I can give you, not just the latest filler episode till I get to another good one.
And then on the flip side of, the difficult part, what would be the most rewarding part of making this podcast?
Oh God, the friendships. I mean, there's hardly been anyone on the show that I could think of about 3 people that I had on the show that I had no idea who they were before. And they came via recommendation or something like that. I was acquaintances with most of these people. The first 3 or 4 guests are folks that I knew really well. So they were kind of like a safety net. It was more like me calling them up and going, hey, you want to do me a favor? I'm trying to get this thing going. I think you'd be good. And they did me the favor and kind of just got this ball rolling. Mm-hmm. After it started rolling, I was able to call somebody and the show had enough of a life that I could at least call somebody or send them an email and go, hey, I've got this show. Here's a couple episodes if you want to check out the quality. So you know when you're coming on what to expect, and that you know you're going to be treated with care and respect and everything that goes along with that. But some of those folks that we've encountered, and like Pete Vizentine, for instance, I knew who Pete was because he's had Fight to Fight clothing forever. I had no idea Pete was an entrepreneur coach, the vlogger, Macoupin County CEO, all those things that he was doing. And Pete became kind of a turning point in the show. You were on that show with us, Bob. We both kind of interviewed him. We did a quick little video. It was our first foray into it. And the reason we did it is because Pete talked about how effective that it was. And you guys were talking back and forth about video. And I thought, well, maybe that's something I should do. So Pete became a good resource in that regard. You know, when something would happen, he'd shoot me a note and he'd go, hey, try this, try that. It was great. So making friends like Pete and getting to know a guy like Zach Weigel a lot better. Kalen Chardon, the Ghost Hunter, these folks, I had no idea who Kalen was beforehand. And Skip Talbot, the guy we had that was a tornado chaser. So these friendships that I've made and future connections, and now just at any point in time, you know, if I want to drop them a text or a note or something and ask them a question about whatever it is they do, it works. I've got new friends out of it. And, and the other thing I would say is, you know, when you talk about having awareness and how it's grown is now I walk around places and people don't go, hey, John. They go, hey, John, what's that like? You know, and that's their first thing out of their mouth now. So now what's that like has become almost like, you know, my identity, which in a way, I don't want it to be my identity. You know, this podcast is not the only thing in my life, but it really makes me happy that I didn't name the show something stupider like, you know, hey, F off, you know, because I wouldn't want people walking up to me going, hey, John, you know, F off all the time.
But it sticks.
It sticks. Yeah. It's kind of become like it's like, what's that like? You know, got milk. It's become a one little phrase thing that gives it some identity. And now it just rolls off people's tongues and they go, oh, well, what's that like, John? That's John. What's that like? And it's become, in 6 months, it's become intermixed in a lot of ways for me. And that's been kind of cool when, you know, when people I know on the fringes, even like friends I've had for 30, 40 years, people I went to high school with, or maybe I met, you know, 20 years ago and I worked with them. And, you know, now these people are coming up to me. I haven't seen them in years. And they'll go, oh, I love your show. And I'm like, really? And you know, they're all ages. I've got kids that were on like my son's baseball team that watch it. And then somebody came up to me not too long ago and she goes, oh, you probably don't remember me. She goes, but you used to work with my daughter back at Hardee's back in the early 90s. And I'm like, wow, I do remember you. And I do remember your daughter. And it's so cool that you listen to this and you've made that connection. So I don't know, Bob. I mean, there's a lot of positives to it. The negatives are, again, time. I guess the other negative is it cost me some money out of my pocket, but I call it a hobby because it is. It's something that, just like all hobbies, costs you probably a little bit more than what you're going to take back in. But the rewards I've got from it, I can't put a monetary price on. It's been phenomenal.
So what's next? I know it's what's that like, but what's next for what's that like?
I have no idea. I'm just going to keep doing it. I mean, this whole thing started with me and you on a rainy March Sunday afternoon talking about go-kart racing. Within a couple hours, like I said, I was able to get on the internet, figure out how to post it. And then, only then did I figure out, I was like, oh, well, now I have to do this. And everything that's happened since has been happy accidents. So what comes next, I don't know if it goes any other directions, but I want to take the directions that it already has and keep going farther with them. I've got a list of 20 topics I'd like to cover, and things on that list be like, you know, the Coliseum Ballroom. Big thing here in the central Illinois area. History of that, what happened, its demise, the family stories behind it. There's a lot of meat to it. In the same area, this used to be a big area for organized crime back in the 20s and 30s and 40s. Mm-hmm. I'd love to explore that a little bit. There's been sports stories, you know, Staunton Bulldogs in 1993, almost 25 years ago, go from obscurity in a real life Hoosiers type story, run right through the regional playoffs and make it all the way and win the state title. I'd love to do like a 30 for 30 type interview with those guys, and I've kind of got that set up, so that could happen. Just any topics that have come to me, it's because, people have listened and said, hey, it'd be cool to hear about X. And I've gotten 2 or 3 or 4 of those episodes already. And I would tell you, if you're listening out there and there's something you want to hear, please let me know. We'll try to squeeze it in. Sometimes there are things that I've heard from people and it might not just really fit kind of what this is, which it's meant to be entertainment. It's meant to be informative. It's meant to be something that if you were thinking about trying something, that you might want to try it yourself. I really only have 2 rules, and that's I don't want to discuss religion and politics, because those 2 things seem to go hand in hand, yet they're very divisive to a lot of folks. You and your best friend can totally agree to disagree on a lot of things, and I'm going to play this one right down the middle. So I don't know where it's going to go. It'll keep going. I'm just going to keep pushing the directions that it's already going and see where it takes us. It might be a thing, Bob, that it expands. I don't have all the time in the world to do that. I'm talking to you, Bob, personally, if you had ideas and things you wanted to use the platform for, it's certainly, you're a guy that I trust to do that on my network or whatever you want to call it and take it a little bit further. We'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, I'd say the next thing we need to do is getting an event kind of similar to like the Turner Fest or et cetera, whatever that comes to town, except it's like a nightly thing where we have What's That Like live, not like a live broadcast to the Facebook side, but like where everyone can come, gather around the What's That Like Nation. We'll have familiar faces, new guests, and we just kind of talk to people, have a nice, huge gathering. And then we just got to have, musical performances and fireworks and fireballs of explosion and a flyover, and we'll take all the people that you've had and all the different areas that they cover, and it'll just be one big huge event.
Bob, I think you're onto something. I've actually had a very similar thought, the actual same title. I would just tell everyone out there, stay tuned. That is one direction I think we might take this.
So that's all the questions I had for you on my side. But now we're going to do something a little bit different here. You like to, when you have guests on the podcast, ask them random questions that's kind of offset to what their main focus for being on the show is. So we went back to your old guests and asked them if they had any questions for Mr. What's That Like?
Okay, I can do this.
So the first one, we're going to go back to Jason Kramer. You remember him, right?
I remember Jason. Jason was Jason is a lifelong friend of mine. Jason and I knew each other. Of course, we talk about this in his episode. Back when we probably got together as friends, really back in the 7th and 8th grade and through high school. But that was a great episode. He ran a Boston Marathon. We heard all about how he trained. I thought that was a great episode. It really was probably my first real show that I did after you and I did our thing. What it was awesome about it is I was just kind of figuring it out as I went along. It was really starting to lay the tracks down. So what does my friend JK got for this, JK?
Well, he submitted over 5 questions for me to ask you.
Okay.
First one is Sammy or Dave?
Ooh, he's talking about Van Halen there. We're a big Van Halen fan. I love both those guys. I would say I prefer Sammy Hagar's music overall, but Van Halen didn't become Van Halen without David Lee Roth. So they're both very important, and I like them both. But I guess I'm going to have to tilt the scale to Mr. Hagar in that one.
All right. Second one. If you could sing just one karaoke song, which one would it be?
I can sing a lot of karaoke songs, but I sing the karaoke songs that I can sing. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
If there was one I wish I could sing, it would be something that I think would really get the crowd going. Something like I Will Survive by Gloria Gaynor, something off the wall.
Yeah, I can't picture you singing that.
But at first I was afraid, I was petrified. I think
that's good. That's good.
It would be great if people would just get up and go crazy when you sang that.
Yeah.
But I can't sing that. So I'll say that.
All right. Bud Light or Miller Lite?
Bud Light. Go with the hometown team.
Straightforward answer there.
Yeah.
Who was the real talent in Nirvana?
The real talent in Nirvana, I love Dave Grohl. Dave Grohl is the man. He's the only true rock star that's out there producing today, in my opinion.
Amen.
But the true talent in Nirvana was Kurt Cobain. Troubled dude, obviously. I mean, he killed himself at the age of 27. And the reason I will say it's Kurt Cobain is because Dave Grohl says he learned how to do what he does from Kurt Cobain. So Kurt Cobain.
And then the final one that he submitted over to us, heads or tails, and why?
Okay, now if you go back and listen to the episode with Jason, there's a story behind this. So I'll recap it real quickly. Probably 1988, county track meet. Jason and I are on the track team. I think we were co-captains, but the coach took me up into the booth because we had tied for second or third or something in the county, and they didn't have enough trophies for all of us. And since we tied, we had to call a coin toss. And I called heads, and we lost. And I came down to the bus, and Jason says to me, "Knowles, where's the trophy?" And I said, I lost it in a coin toss. And he goes, "Well, what'd you call?" And I said, "Heads." He goes, "You never call heads. You always call tails." So it's tails. To this day, I will always call tails. If I've got a straight up choice, I will call tails. And the reason why is because of you, Mr. Jason Kramer. Thank you.
Then we move on to Tim Boostrom.
Yeah, Tim. Tim was a great episode, too. Tim, if you remember, he was the guy that goes to Cubs fantasy camp. Talked about him a little bit early in the episode. He was the kind of the guy that clarified the whole what's that like as the premise for this show. But Tim was great. He was probably, it was my first real big, what I'd call production here in the studio. I kind of got the equipment figured out. I had you done at that point. Jason, we did over Skype, but we did Tim here in the studio and got good recording and good quality out of that. And he had some great stories as well. And if you ever wanted to do one of those fantasy baseball camps, he lays it all out for you. And he couldn't have been a funnier and more engaging guest as well. Tim was great. What's Tim got for me?
Well, here's Tim with your question.
Hey, John, this is Tim Boostrom. Glad to see the podcast is going great. Got a quick question for you. We all know that you're a musician, part-time, and love playing the classic rock of the 70s and 80s. But what song or band are you a little bit embarrassed or maybe a lot embarrassed to really like?
I go with the Bee Gees. The Bee Gees are not something that you would probably find in my record collection, but I thought the Bee Gees were phenomenal. That whole late 70s disco era, their high harmonies, the way they put things together, and just great songs. I mean, 40 years later, those songs, they're just good songs. I mean, it's nothing that, I walk around doing, but when one comes on, you can't help but sing along to it. There's just so many good Bee Gees songs. So I'll say the Bee Gees. Thanks for that question, Tim. I think the next guest then we had was Emily Schneider, and she was awesome too. I've known Emily for a while. I knew her family more than I knew Emily, but I knew Emily went to Second City and she was doing some plays and stuff like that. She's a comedian. I wanted to have her on. I thought she'd be a really funny guest, and she was. She was a great storyteller. We did some improv as part of the show that I thought was really neat. You were in the room for that one too, Bob. And we did a lot of cool stuff with Emily. And I think she's got some questions. Go ahead and play the audio clip we got from Emily.
Hey, John. First thing I wanted to say is congratulations on the success of the show. And here are some of my questions. They're all kind of like Disney-related, sort of. First off, Disney World or Disneyland? Second, why is Goofy treated like a person while Pluto is treated like a dog? Aren't they the same thing? Third, why does Donald Duck not have to wear pants, in your opinion? Some other questions, this or that. Would you rather go see a play or go see a movie? What about comedy or horror? All right, so that's really what I've got, and I can totally send you more if you need them. But like I said, congratulations, and I'll talk to you later.
Okay, that's a good list Emily had, though. I think the first thing she asked me was Disney World or Disneyland. I do have an opinion on this. Most people would say Disney World. I love Disney World. I really love Disneyland, and I'll tell you why. It's small. It's the original place. If you're a fan of Walt Disney parks, it's Walt's park. He was originally there, and the park itself is so compact, and a lot of the rides that are shared between both Disney World and Disneyland, like the Magic Kingdom and Disneyland, the ones in Disneyland just are a little longer. They're a little better. I like those a lot. She mentioned Goofy. It's treated like a person and Pluto like a dog. Well, Goofy can talk, so I guess that moves him up in class rank a little bit. So I'm going to go with that answer on that. Why doesn't Donald wear pants? Well, I guess he doesn't have to, so why would he? I mean, would anyone wear pants if they didn't have to? I don't know. And that's a good question. I don't have an answer for that one. He should be wearing pants, I guess. Don't you think? Yeah, I think he should. Would I rather go to a play or would I rather go to a movie? Depends on the play. I've been to a lot more good movies than I've been to good plays. But then again, a well-done play or a musical, I think is a really cool experience because you can appreciate the talent of the people that are in it. And it's all done live, which I appreciate. So maybe I'll say play. I think I'll go with play. I think, it's a one-time performance that happens in the moment. I think that's a very cool thing. And the performers are really great at that. And then the last one, comedy versus horror. My wife will tell you I can't stand horror movies. I don't get entertainment out of them at all. But I love a good comedy because comedies last. Horror doesn't, in my opinion. You don't go back and get scared at the same time. But those jokes in good comedies, they never end. Thanks a lot, Emily. I loved having you as a guest and hope you'll come back sometime. Thanks a lot.
Next one is Zach Weigel. He's got a couple questions for you. What do you remember about the Zach Weigel episode?
Zach was a great episode, too. I had known Zach kind of through friends for probably the last 3 or 4 years. The band I'm in, Retro Rocket, generally plays one of the events that lead up to his big event that he throws in Hillsborough every year called Stamp Out Cancer. So I know Zach through a friend of mine, through the guitar player, Toby Bauer, that's in my band. And I felt comfortable enough to reach out to him because I know he's got a lot going on in the city of Hillsborough. And I've heard him on the radio a couple of times, and I knew he'd be a real good guest. So we went back and forth, finally scheduled it. He was one of the first guests that I really didn't know, of course, but he came over graciously, and then we've been like best buddies ever since, so there's times when I'll just text him out of the blue. I'll see something funny. He'll do the same for me. We had this whole 5 questions format really solidified on Zach's episode, and we were talking about his favorite Christmas gifts. And then, of course, I had a lot of people come up to me and talk to me after they heard Zach's episode, and they were just amazed of everything that they didn't know was going on in Hillsborough that Zach talked about. Some of it he did, some of it he was just a part of, but I think it really inspired some people in some other communities to go, I got to take ownership of some of the things that are going on and try to make my town better too. So Zach was a kind of a pivotal moment in the course of the show. What's Mr. Weigel got for me? He's got to have some good stuff there.
He's actually got 4 questions here for you. And the first one is, if you were to start a cult, what would it be like?
If I were to start a cult,
well, isn't that what the nation, the What's That Like Nation is kind of turning into?
Well, that's my cult. If you're a crazy follower of me, you need to move on. I guess the cult that I would want to be a part of would be the cult of all the wacky side characters from TV sitcoms. I mean, if you think about a compound where like Kramer from Seinfeld and Cliff Clavin from Cheers, and I don't know, think of somebody from a TV show. It's not the main character, but it's the person that walks, like Wilson from Home Improvement. Mm-hmm. That would be the cult of people that I would want to hang out with. That would be funny to me. I would like that. Thanks for that question, Zach. Good one.
What movie would be improved if it was made into a musical?
The Bridges of Madison County. And the reason I say that is because it's probably the worst movie I've ever seen. And you could certainly improve it by having some upbeat songs in the middle of it. So there you go. Thanks.
What is the funniest joke you know by heart?
Funniest joke I know by heart came to me from a guy named Bruce Nall. And this probably isn't the funniest joke you've ever heard, but it's a tribute to my friend Bruce, who left us way too soon. He died a number of years ago. But I worked with Bruce for a number of years, and he never could tell a joke. So one day he comes in, and he's going to tell us all this joke, and he heard it over the weekend. He thought it was great. And it's clean, so it's okay. You can repeat it. But it's about all these guys in a prison. This new guy goes to prison for whatever reason. And on the first day, he goes into the lunchroom, and he sits down at this table with these other convicts. And as he's sitting there, he hears somebody go like, "Number 7." And everybody goes, yeah, that's funny. Pretty soon, somebody goes, "Number 34." They go, "Oh, yeah, you got him on that one. That was funny." And a few minutes later, somebody goes, "Number 17. Oh, you're a funny guy." And this guy, he's new to the prison. And he asked the guy next to him, and he says, "Why is everybody laughing every time somebody says a number?" He goes, "Look, we've all been in here so long. There are no new jokes. We just number them to save time. And he goes, oh, I get that. So what happens is maybe 5 minutes later, somebody yells out, number 46, and nobody laughs. And the guy goes, well, why didn't anybody laugh? And the guy sitting next to me goes, well, that guy never could tell a joke. Now that's not, that's the punchline. But what makes it so funny is my friend Bruce, who couldn't tell the joke, forgot the punchline. He couldn't figure out the punchline. So he tells the whole joke, forgets it, and then a couple minutes later, he remembers what the punchline was after he called his wife to ask what the punchline was so he could share it all with us. So that one's for you, Zach. That's the funniest joke I know by heart, but it's really a tribute there to my friend Bruce Nall. R.I.P., buddy.
And then his final question here was, what song do you know all the words to that you're embarrassed to say?
Oh, gosh. Hey, I just met you. And this is crazy, but here's my number, so call me maybe. Yeah, Carly Rae Jepsen. Back, I think, in the Olympics, maybe that was 2012 when that song was a hit.
Yeah.
I love that song because all the swim teams and all the baseball teams, they're all doing Call Me Maybe videos. I'm not even embarrassed by it. I love that song.
Yeah, you should be proud. I'm in that same boat.
Who's next? What do we got next?
Kaylin Chardon.
Oh, Kaylin. Kaylin was our first repeat guest, if I don't count you, in Rackley, the Rack Almanac. Mm-hmm. Kaylin is our #1 downloaded show of all time. She was the first guest we had that was by fan request. When we did the first couple of shows, somebody said, oh, you need to get one of these ghost hunters in there. And I go, that's actually a really good idea. So my friend, again, Toby Bauer, in my band Retro Rocket, he goes, oh, there's a lady that works with his wife at their realty company, and she does ghost tours. So he gave me her phone number. I called her up. She came over, and you were a part of that episode. Mm-hmm. We did a whole episode with Kaylin. She went through a lot of local history stuff I never knew about, and we did our first little video thing, if you remember, where she demonstrated all the tools. That was a great episode. She was great. What's Kaylin got?
She's got 5 questions here for you, and the first one.
If you could have dinner with one famous dead person, who would it be and why?
Robin Williams. I think Robin Williams would just crack me up because the guy just went nonstop. One of the funniest guys I think that ever lived. I think Robin Williams was a true comedic genius, and he was just so quick and so funny and so to the point. He would have been a riot. I probably would just be spitting my food out and snorting, the entire time. I think Robin Williams would have been awesome. Awesome idea.
And here's her second question.
If you could join a band as their new member, what band would it be?
See, I'm one of these guys that never wanted to be in that band. I wanted a band of my own. But who would I join an existing band? It would have to be a band that made a lot of money and didn't tour so much. So I will say like Metallica, because they just go out on stadium tours and they got to be making boatloads off those. And I'm sure they get treated pretty well in between. I wouldn't want to jump on buses and doing the hard stuff anymore. So yeah, we'll go with Metallica or a U2, maybe the Eagles.
That'd be a good one.
Yep. I just play backup and sing backup in the Eagles reformed. I'll go with that one, Eagles.
Here's her third question.
Name a movie or TV show that everyone else seems to love, but you just can't stand.
All those Law and Order shows. There's like 100 of them. The CSI, all those CSIs. People watch all those. I got nothing against them. Never got into them. But it seems like it's the same show over and over and over every single week. Maybe that's what's good about them. I kind of like shows that are more serialized, that the story kind of takes place and starts one way and has a couple twists and turns and ends up somewhere else. Those are the shows I like the best. These pattern,
cookie cutter
shows. I'll go with that. I can't narrow it down to just one, but a lot of popular shows out there that I just don't like.
And this is her next question.
I'm stealing this from James Lipton, the guy on the inside the actor's studio, and he always asks, assuming heaven does exist, what do you hope that God says to you whenever you arrive at the pearly gates?
Your friends have been waiting for you, which means that I lived a pretty long and happy life, and when I got there, I was ready to go, and I was ready to see him again. That would be it. Now I'm going to cry. Who's next on the list, Bob? Who else we got?
Next guest, one of the popular ones, Pete Visentine.
Oh, Pete. Well, we talked about this already. Pete was a big turning point in the show. That was a great episode as well. If you're interested in entrepreneurship or a story, and a very powerful story of why he became the guy he is today, if you're a young person looking for a way in the world, that's a good guy to have as a role model. I'm way older than him, and I learned a ton. When I think about that episode, you were in the room with me, and we were both talking to him, and we basically had 3 generations of people. And, I'm kind of I'm kind of past my prime in terms of, years, but I feel like I'm in my prime in terms of where I know where I'm at in the world. And then you got a guy like Pete that's in his late 20s, probably, I think he's in his late 20s, and he's really building out what his future is going to be. And then he had you, and you're just like looking to find your kickstart in the world. And I thought he had great advice for both of us. I think it was a very mutual conversation we had. And I thought he was just phenomenal in the story. So if you want to go back and hear a great story and a message, go back and listen to that Pete Visentine episode. What's Pete got for me?
He's got one question, but it's a pretty good, solid question here. What is your craziest high school or college story?
Craziest high school or college story? In high school, I'll tell you a great story. I was living with my grandparents back in like 87, 88, somewhere in that range. We were big into fireworks. A lot of us, we had a friend, his name was Dennis Foster. His family owned a fireworks stand, and we had all the surplus all winter long. So they'd go to the fireworks stand in Missouri, sell fireworks, and bring boxes of this crap home all the time. And we would drive around in cars, pickup trucks. It didn't matter. We'd be, bottle rockets were too wimpy for us. So we were throwing the big stuff. Like those big mortars, those star shells. Mm-hmm. We'd throw that at each other's cars. We just doing crazy stuff like that. That's not even the crazy part of the story. One time we did burn a field off on accident. So I think the statute of limitations has run out on that.
And you're also a volunteer firefighter. So that kind of goes against.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll say we. I don't remember doing it myself. I just remember saying, let's get the heck out of here. But anyway, some of these guys were going to pull a prank on me I think it was a Friday night. So they came past my house. I lived outside of town. Like I said, I lived with my grandparents. And they threw a whole bunch of firecrackers like up on the front porch. Pop, 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 pop. Whatever. The weekend goes by. Monday comes around, and I go in and I tell them all. It's like March 29th or something like that. I go in and I tell them all, it's like, yeah, somebody was out shooting guns by the house the other night. My grandpa got all upset and, he had a heart attack. He's in the hospital. And these guys started freaking out. And then they all started talking to each other. It's like, hey, don't tell him. John's grandpa's in the hospital. Don't say anything. And so they kept, keeping their story straight. And they were walking out. And there was one guy out of that group that cracked. All right. And he told me what they were all doing. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I kept playing along. And then March 29th hits, March 30th. It's a little bit more of the story. Oh, he's not doing so good. And then on April 1st, April Fool's Day, I think I was a senior in high school. My brother may have been a sophomore. This could have been our freshman and / junior years. But at any rate, I have my brother walk up to me during lunch and tell me, Grandpa died. And these guys, if you could have seen their faces, they were as white as a ghost. I mean, they were just like freaking out. They thought they were going to get charged with like murder. And then I jumped up across the table and I grabbed one of them by the shirt. And I was like, I know you did it. I know you were out there throwing those firecrackers. You killed my grandpa. Da, 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 da. And he's freaking out. And then I go, April Fool. And he's like, oh, no. Ah! And then the best part about it is there was a couple of the other guys that weren't at the table. Uh-huh. So I got to do the same joke 2 or 3 more times during the day. And the best one was, if he remembers it or not, I remember it like it's yesterday. There's a certain guy, he comes from a certain family that has a funeral home in Staunton. And I think he's still part of that family business over there. But Jim Williamson, he was like the last guy that I could go get. He like went home for lunch and I got him on his way back. And I bent him over a bench and I'm scaring the crap out of him. And, my grandpa died. You killed him. Blah, 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 blah. And he's freaking out. And then I told him April Fool's Day. He's like, oh, my God, you can't believe you got me. Now, the coda to the story is like a day later, he comes back. He's like, so is your grandpa still in the hospital? Or I'm like, no, none of that happened, you moron. He's fine. So that was probably the goofiest thing. That's a good question, Pete. Thanks. I like that one.
Next, we go on to Gabe and Kara Dexheimer. What do you remember about the podcast that they were on?
Yeah, Gabe and Kara came on with Todd Overby. They were kind of some of the board members there at Turner Hall. So we were promoting the Queen of Hearts drawing. We talked about that. We talked about the upcoming Mount Olive Homecoming, everything they had going on, the parade, and just everything about Turner Hall. It's a very unique kind of nonprofit place here in Mount Olive that draws a lot of interest. And since that episode, not because of that episode, certainly, but since that episode with the Queen of Hearts, I mean, the crowd that they draw into that place is amazing because of that Queen of Hearts drawing. But it all goes back to that episode. I'm going to take credit for it. what did Gabe or Kara or whoever have to ask?
Well, Gabe had 2 questions for you here.
Hey, John. This is Gabe from Mount Olive Turner Hall. If you could have anyone on your show, a politician, a celebrity, anyone, who would it be?
Trump. Because I just want to look at him and go, really? Did that just really come out of your mouth every time he says something? I'll go with Trump.
That's a good one. His last question here was,
what is something your wife wishes you had more of?
Time. It'd be easy to say money, but if we had more money and I still didn't have time, we couldn't do all the things we've been planning on doing. So I'll go with time. I think that's a good answer.
So Kara's question, she had one question for you, is if you win the Turner Hall Queen of Hearts, what will be the first thing you buy after you pay your producer, Bob?
If I win the Turner Hall Queen of Hearts, I will buy 100 What's That Like t-shirts and hand them out at the following Queen of Hearts drawing, just as a big thank you to all the promotion that was that I've received from the show because of the Queen of Hearts. And then I would probably remodel the kitchen in the house. Nothing too crazy. I'm actually in a split with a friend of mine, Mr. Don now. So if he wins, I get half. If I win, he gets half. So even if we win, I don't get the full 70 or even 50. I'm down to a partial, but that'd be great because both of our families could benefit a whole lot from that. We've still got kids we got to put through school. Pretty serious answer on that one, but I'll be serious on the t-shirt promise. So everybody gets a t-shirt. Well, 100 people get a t-shirt. Must be present to enter and win.
At least it was a responsible answer, not like I'm going to go out and buy something really stupid I'm going to have for only one day and then I'm going to break it or something.
Yeah.
Bronson Painter, he didn't send any questions to you, but what do you remember about his episode?
Yeah, Bronson was another one that came through fan request. Bronson is a guy that runs those concealed carry classes, and I know a lot of folks are always thinking about doing that. What's that like to carry? What's it like to get your training? And it was actually from a common friend of ours. I've known Bronson since we were kids, just growing up playing together in Staunton, Illinois. I knew he did this stuff, but I really didn't think of it. And then a guy that I work with that listens to the show goes, "Oh, you should have someone on to talk about concealed carry classes." And I know a guy, and his name's Bronson Painter. I'm like, I know that guy. And just strangely enough, Bronson was one of those people like I hadn't talked to in years that reached out to me like via text and said, "Man, keep these shows coming. I love them." I'm like, we had Bronson on. It was a longer episode, but it was really good and informative. And I really enjoyed having him. He was really, really good on the show.
And then next we have Randy Bursch and Adam Gaffney.
Yeah.
What do you remember about their episode?
Well, they came on to promote the first annual Turner Fest, which happened back in September. And Randy and I had been trying to get together for a while to talk about it. We finally got it done. And when he did, he brought one of the acts, which was Adam Gaffney, that's got a band called the Highway Saints. So those guys came on, talked about what the whole event was going to look like, how they had kind of built the event out of nothing. Randy essentially was, and putting it all together. They had a great first event out there. I think they're going to have one again next year, I hope. Show's always been about, as you can, as I've said, the most interesting people, places, or events in Illinois. And this is one of those events that I wanted to kind of bring and shed some light on. So, yeah, it was a great episode. What do they got for me?
Randy's got a couple Coke or Pepsi style questions for you.
Yeah.
Before we get to that, Coke or Pepsi?
Coke.
Thank you. Because Pepsi is just swamp water.
Mm-hmm.
But here's his first one. Baseball or football?
Football. I hate saying it because I think football's got a long road ahead. I never played football, but I will watch a football game on TV over a baseball game unless it's like a World Series game any day of the week.
Flip-flops or sneakers?
Flip-flops.
Pizza with pineapple or without?
That's a debate. You know, people think it shouldn't be on there. I'm going to go in the with category. Every now and then you get somebody buys, 10 pizzas and sets them out on a buffet. And, you got the sausages and the pepperoni and a couple deluxes, a.k.a. they throw the garbage can on it. And then off to the side, there's this ham and pineapple pizza that, if you get there late, you're going to get stuck with. Mm-hmm. And it's actually quite enjoyable. So I'm going to go with pineapple. Yeah.
Okay. City or country?
I'm going to go with the country. I can always drive to the city. Yeah.
T-shirt or button-up?
Definitely T-shirt. I button up shirt every day when I go to work, and I can't wait to come home and put on a nice, comfortable T-shirt.
Randy had a question here for you, and this is it right here.
Hey, John, if you could have any superpower, what would it be?
What superpower would I have? Oh, I definitely want to fly. Yeah, that'd just be a whole lot easier than getting around and be like, just fly right over there, no problem. That would be the one. Pretty easy.
Adam Gaffney had one question for you. If you turn into a zombie, who would you eat first?
Who would I eat first? I'd go after the Kardashians and do the world a favor. How about that? Just rid the world of Kardashians for everyone. That'd be good. That'd be my answer. All right. Who's next?
Skip Talbot. He didn't actually have a question for you, but what do you want to talk about as far as his episode?
Yeah. Sorry I didn't get a question from Skip, but Skip was a good episode too. We had so much content with Skip, and he was so scientific and so passionate about what he was doing. I couldn't turn any of it away. I couldn't edit much of it out because he was so passionate about everything he was talking about. Great episode. For fans that like me of the movie Twister, you're always wondering what it'd be like. I've never seen an actual tornado. Mm-hmm. One hit Mount Olive here. It's like 5 years ago or 4 years ago now, but that was in the nighttime. We saw the damage it did, but I never saw it. And it's one of those things that I kind of hope to. There's a couple of guys that I was on the fire department with. We went and got our storm spotter training license and all that. But when time comes, when there's a tornado warning, I do what any guy should do and grabs his family and heads to the nearest basement. I don't go out and look at it. But it's one of those things I'd love to go out in where he does, out in the Great Plains, and just chase him around for a week. So it was more of a personal rewarding story for me than it was probably for any listener. I enjoyed having Skip on a lot. He was great.
And then the final one, we go to James Labonte, most recent one.
Oh, James was it was a good episode too. James is a family friend. We've been real close for a number of years, but James has got a business called Labonte Photography. We talk about all that in the episode, but he's been doing so much more than just taking pictures. He runs classes for folks that want to learn how to use their camera. He said he's got a passion for dusty cameras and getting them back in shape. And he's also doing things like having photo walks around different areas to help inspire some folks to do some things. So I thought that was a great episode. Has he got a question? Yeah.
And his question is, which modern day Marvel superhero are you most like and why?
Oh, modern day superhero am I most like? I'm going to go with Iron Man. Not because I have because Iron Man has no super abilities himself. He was a rich guy that built a suit, so I couldn't do that. I'm just a poor guy that built a podcast. But Tony Stark is just a total smart aleck, and I would say I'm most like Tony Stark. The rest of them take themselves too seriously, so I'll go with that, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Bob, you got any questions for me? You didn't have any on that list.
I guess one question that I would ask is, you've bounced around the world a little bit.
Yeah.
Where's one place that you would like to visit that you haven't visited?
There's so much here in the United States I've yet to see, although I have seen a lot of it. People do those, how many states have you been to things? Mm-hmm. I've been to, I think, 39 of the 50. All right. I had 38 of the 50 probably 6 years ago. And I told myself when I was like 42 or 41, I wanted to hit all 50 by 50. But those same, say, 10 or 11 are eluding me. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to knock all those out. If I had to travel internationally, I think the place I would really want to go is Italy. I'd like to go to Italy.
And why is that?
I think it's the food.
Yeah. I can't argue that one.
No, there's a lot of history there. There's a lot to see. I'd like to see Rome. I'd like to see Venice. I think I'd like to go to Italy. That'd be a cool place that I think I'd like to go.
What's your dream car?
My dream car?
Your dream car.
I think Tesla's going to make a SUV style car or a truck or something. I think I might want to go with one of those. I'm not into sports cars, supercars, anything like that. I want something that's got good air conditioning, it's comfortable seats, and it's got a great stereo system, and I can sit up a little higher. So right now I have kind of one of those mini SUVs, a Ford Edge. That's my favorite car I've ever had. Other than that, I think cars are a tremendous waste of money for most people. They really are. I'm kind of functional in that regard, so I don't have a dream supercar or anything like that. So, Bob, you were the very first guest of the What's That Like podcast. You never got subjected to any of this stuff. I hadn't invented the list yet. So I'm turning the tables back on you right now, my friend.
Oh, boy.
What's your favorite Christmas gift you ever got?
There was a time way back when, before I wanted to get in this film thing, and I had thought that I wanted to be a teacher. Mm-hmm. So Santa got me like a whiteboard, chalkboard easel, a desk, pretty much like an entire classroom in one huge care package.
Really?
That's the one that sticks out the most to me. Because like I could go back and think like, oh, I like biking. I got a bike for Christmas. But like that's the one that like I remember seeing that and I was just like super, super excited for.
Okay. And what song are you most embarrassed to know all the words to? You can't say Call Me Maybe.
I was about to go back to it. Kind of in that same realm as Call Me Maybe. I'd go to like Party in the USA.
Yeah.
I could do that one.
Hands up, sing my song, butterflies fly away.
Nodding my head like, yeah. Moving my, yeah.
What would you go back in a short time for you tell your 12-year-old self?
Start making videos, because I had started making videos in the 7th grade. Mm-hmm. So I think if I would have started a little bit more sooner, I could have probably done a little bit. I'd be a little further ahead. I mean, I'm pretty far ahead for my age compared to like a lot of video people.
Yeah.
But I think if I would have started a little bit early, that would have been cool. And also I would have told myself to play a sport in junior high or high school, because I know the video work I did for the football team in high school played a huge role in how far I've got with video and getting my name out there and everyone knowing me.
Sure, yeah.
But like I feel like I would be a little bit a better rounded person if I would have played a sport in high school.
That's a good answer. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you could play a musical instrument, which one would you play and why?
Well, I could tell you what it wouldn't be, and it wouldn't be anything brass because I played the trumpet for like 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And I hated it.
Yeah.
I would either, it's a tie between the guitar or the piano, because those are two like main instruments. And I feel like if I could coordinate myself to play either, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah.
Then I could serenade all the women.
There you go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. That's why I'd do it. What is the What's That Like podcast meant to you over the last 6 months?
Well, kind of similar to what you were saying, as far as how we started. I just got a message from my neighbor and it said, hey, I got this idea. Let's try it out. And when I first heard about it, I kind of was a little skeptical. I was like, he's probably trying to do something out of his realm. May not go well, but hey, I'll give it a try. I'll walk over there and see what's going on. Just to be able to sit down, kind of like we are right now, and just, having a normal conversation, talking into the microphones, recording it, and being able to talk about something that I'm passionate about, and seeing you do that with so many, cool guests, and you get to kind of get an insight into people's lives, and to be able to say that I was a part of something like this as far as the beginning part and helping in a way to get it to where it is now. The What's That Like podcast has meant a lot to me. I would almost say it's like a stepchild to ATA Network in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, I like
a partner.
I like taking, it's something that I like to do a lot. And it's not like my regular job where I'm getting paid to do this. I believe in strongly to where I don't need to pay from it. It's kind of like with you. It's like I get the enjoyment from being able to produce it and getting it out to people. And very similar to you, when you see the success of the podcast and seeing it grow and more people, learning about it and liking it and everything, just like how it makes you happy, it makes me happy. So, to be able to be a part of something like this, It's awesome. This has meant a lot to me.
Yeah. Great. Well, like I said, when we started this, the first hour of the conversation we had, not even on mic, was, I don't know what we're going to do with it, but let's just try it and see how it goes. And you're certainly, one of the chiefs here of What's That Like Nation as we build this thing out. I guess I'm probably like at least a 90% owner, but you're getting paid just as much as I am out of this thing. It really is. We try to have some fun with it. I have one final question for you, though.
Yeah.
Why don't you ever let my friend Greg Shively come on the show? You always tell me we can't. Why?
Well, first things first, there's a time restraint here. Second, what is he going to add to the show that's going to make it more interesting?
Yeah.
Is this guy?
He would.
Is he even real?
Yes, he's real. He's been a friend of mine for 20 years almost. I mean, he loves podcasts just as much as I did. When I was talking about doing one of these, the only thing that really came between us was he was mad he wasn't the first guest and you were. Is that what you got against him?
Okay, John, you know what? Since this is a special episode of the podcast, I will give you time to dial him up.
You're going to finally let him on.
I will let him on the podcast.
Fine. Let's do it. Let's dial him. I got his phone number right here.
All right.
I'll go ahead and dial him in. Let's get him on the phone, and hopefully he answers here.
Hi, this is Greg Shively, and I'm sorry I missed your call. I'm likely out doing something very awesome right now, but if you leave me your name, number, and a short message, I'll return your call as soon as possible. And if this is that jerk producer Bob, tell John if he wants me on my podcast, he's got to call and ask me nicely.
Well, thanks a lot, Bob.
Well,
Greg, I'm sorry once again. We missed you. I swear to God, we'll have you on the show at some point. I want everybody to know he's 100% a real guy. You can even try to look him up on social media. I mean, you'll find him out there. So anyway, end of the show. We got to get this thing off. Now we're really out of time. Bob, thanks a lot.
Yep.
You asked me these questions and you made me talk too long. But anyway, at any rate, I want to thank you. I think this was a good episode. It helps kind of get the story of the What's That Like podcast out there and what it's really all about. Once again, I can't thank you enough for what you've done to help grow this as well. This has truly been a kind of a life-changing thing for me in a number of ways, and I'm glad it helps you out as well as you go forward in your career. For the rest of you out there, you can listen to the show in any number of ways. It's a triangle between the Facebook page where you'll find all the information, the videos that I put out there that are just going to be quick hits, fun and informative, and you'll always see your Queen of Hearts coverage there. And then finally, the real heart of the show, which has been the audio podcast. You can find them on iTunes. You can find it on the Google Play Store, TuneIn, Stitcher, Alexa on your Amazon device. And finally, you can always go to Bob's channel on the ATA Network. Go to YouTube/ATA Network. Bob, any closing thoughts from you, my friend?
Not really. Just glad you had me back on. Glad to be able to help you out this episode, and glad to get the story of the What's That Like podcast out there to the audience.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot. And we'll be coming to you soon again with more episodes. We've got a whole lot of cool stuff coming up in the near future, and we'll see you then. Thanks a lot. Peace out. What's That Like is available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Search for What's That Like. Subscribe today and never miss an episode. Streaming is available at SoundCloud.com and on the SoundCloud app. Follow What's That Like at Facebook.com/What's That Like Podcast and on Twitter at What's That Like Pod. All opinions of the guests of the What's That Like podcast are their own, not necessarily the views of the host or the podcast producers. We hope you enjoy this podcast serving Central Illinois and beyond. Peace out!